We're going to wrap this Salomon Vitola, which includes a torpedo head. I've gotten a lot of requests for the torpedo head, so this will be kind of a two birds kind of video. This was a Ecuador grown Habano 2000 Viso wrapper leaf. This particular wrapper variety, or this particular batch, is really stretchy and good to work with, which is why I chose it for the Salomon, because the torpedo head requires a bit of stretching, as well as the foot of the Salomon. Now, something to note when you're wrapping a torpedo head, you're going to be pulling the wrapper over like a double cap, and so you need to be able to stretch it over. And if your wrapper is cut at too much of a if you have too much of an arch in your wrapper leaf, as you wrap it towards the head, it's going to be at a really high angle. And so it's important to note that when you're doing a torpedo, it's helpful to have a straighter cut along the top of the leaf, so that when you come to the head, it's not too vertical. If it's too vertical, then you have to pull the wrapper leaf over more. You have to stretch it a lot more so that it hugs the tapered head, and so that it starts its wrap gradually up on the head instead of drastically. If it's too drastic, it won't cover the whole thing. On a Salomon, we're cutting down into the wrapper leaf here, and the point of this is to set ourselves up with a flag for the foot. We just call it a foot flag for the purposes of this video. I don't know if there's a real name for it or not, but we'll start wrapping our cigar from this cut. Actually, I'm going to remove some of this down here so that we don't have too much bunched up at the end. Actually, remove just a little bit more. I don't have a lot of experience with the Salomons, so you're learning right along with me. So we're going to start our wrap right at the radius of the foot, maybe a little bit over the radius, so that when we come along with our foot flag, everything is completely covered. From this point, get some of this glue off of my hands. from this point, everything is the same. Same kind of stretching that we would normally do on any other cigar. Again, making sure that our angle here isn't too vertical so that when we do get to the head, we have the best chance of getting it smooth, pulled over and nice and smooth. Right, and you can see as we're approaching the head, my cut is a little more perpendicular to the direction of the cigar, and that makes it easy to pull it around to start the torpedo head. We're gonna Oh, we just ripped it. We'll just cut that out. I'm going to put just a little bit of glue down low before we start pulling over for the cap. And then we're going to get a little bit extra on there. And then we're going to cut our integrated flag, which is essentially just rounding this piece over. And once you get a better feel for doing torpedoes, you'll have a better idea of how much of a radius to cut. But, I mean, that'll come with practice. You get the hang of that after you do quite a few more of them. A little bit of extra glue there. Okay. So as we pull over, this is the part that people typically struggle with when you're first learning how to do the torpedo heads. We've hit the radius here. And as we start to wrap the radius, we're going to get a bunch of loose stuff up here. To combat that, what we're going to do is we're going to pull it tight against that shoulder, which at the same time, you're pulling your leaf down this way to pull it tight against the radius of that tapered head, right? And that tends to flatten out the overlap here, right? So because we don't want that to go too flat, we need to continue this radius, this curve on our flag here. And then we'll cut right, that's about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch above the tip of the point of the torpedo, right? And then we'll pull that out, and we've got our radius. So what we've done, we've cut the bunch right at the tip, right? About 1/8 of an inch from the tip of the head, and maybe 1/8 of an inch in front of it, and all the way back. And then we've pulled that out. So now we have more flag to work with if we need it. And then we cut more of a radius here so that as we pull it snug against the shoulder of the torpedo head, we're not laying too flat on the overlap here. So, and now we're we got to cut off a little bit more. We need a little bit more of a vertical cut here, so that when we pull that down, I just nick that with a knife. Make sure we have enough glue. So all of this, since we've cut really vertical, we know that a lot of this up here we're not going to use. We're not going to get that far. So we'll just cut that out to get it kind of out of the way. And then we're going to continue to pull that shoulder over nice and snug as we pull around. Right, add a little bit more glue. And since we cut that radius all the way around, almost all the way around, as we continue to pull down on our leaf and pull it snug with that shoulder, our radius leaf keeps coming down at that angle. We're getting a little too flat here, so we're going to cut that a little more vertical. We don't want any sharp edges there, sharp points, or sharp changes in direction for our cut there. So we'll cut that kind of rounded like that. Maybe a little bit more glue. And take your time when you're doing this. I do torpedoes really slow. You watch people do these things in the factories and they're just lightning fast. But take your time and do it right. It's not a race. Right, so now we're getting really close to the tip of the head there. So we're actually going to cut a lot of this out so that we can just kind of wrap up our, we're going to cut this almost rounded like a cap. And then we'll cut a little out here. Get some of this stuff out of the way. Some more glue on there. Get some of this extra stuff out of the way. These little cuttings are sticking because I got the glue on there. And then we'll pull that around nice and tight. And you can see how the radius, as I'm pulling it down, because I've cut that radius into the leaf, as I'm pulling it down, it wraps itself up and spirals. Spirals up to the tip of the leaf. So now I know I'm going to finish it off about right here. So I'm just going to cut that into a tiny little rounded finished cap, just like that. And there we go. So we have our head. Now we'll move on to the foot. Now, my foot's starting to dry out a bit, which is not exactly ideal. I am going to give it just a tiny baby spritz of water. That was probably more than I wanted. But we want it to stay hydrated. I'm fighting with a very dry rolling room here. So we're going to do pretty much the same thing here that we did with the torpedo head. We're just going to do it to the foot. All right, so we're going to cut our radius here. And then we're going to start. We're just going to I don't have a whole hell of a lot of experience with these Salomons, and so you're going to see me have to cut this foot flag down a couple sizes most likely. So we're going to pull it down to start it nice and tight, right? So we pulled it down to pull it into that, and then we're pointing up a little too much, so we're gonna want that a little bit steeper. And then the same concept, as we pull it snug in here, we're going to pull that radius back down. And we want that, this is the tricky part is that you want the radius, as you're pulling it down, you want it to lay in as straight of a line along the foot as you can get it to. But you also want to pull it tight enough where it's sucking into the radius of that nipple. Cut a little bit more out of there to bring that angle up. And then as we wrap around, right, now we've made a full wrap. Now we're going to go down onto the nipple here and try to kind of spiral up to the tip. Take off that sharp edge. Nice rounded, mostly doing this without making the wrinkles as you pull it around is the real challenge. Getting it to just suck into that foot. Oh, it tore it. Getting it to suck into that foot without making those wrinkles is definitely a challenge. Now we're going to oh, that was a lot more glue than I intended to put on it. Alright, we got a few wrinkles in there, but we did cover the whole thing. And there we have, no, I don't like to cut the Salomons with the tuck cutter. There we go. And there we have a finished Salomon. A little rough, but we're getting used to it.